So the PanelView Plus now uses FactoryTalk View Studio, but it initially started with the PanelView Classic, which used Panel Builder 32. So the PanelView Classic up through the PanelView Enhanced all used Panel Builder, and then PanelView Plus came out, and that was the transition to FactoryTalk View Machine Edition. And then it is all the way up to our ... on the right, which is our PanelView Plus 7, which is the newest series that come out for the PanelView. So the PanelView Plus 7 has two primary options. They have a standard option, which you can see here. So the standard option is really designed for OEM and small application. So the application size should be or cannot be more than one controller. It is best to do 25 or less screens and 200 and less alarms. You can get around that alarm by creating your own alarm array if you choose to, but just the embedded alarm functionality, it's recommended to not go over 200 alarms. So there are a few other things. So you can do single or DLR ports for Ethernet. It does not have USB. So that is one thing you guys have to keep in mind, is if you plan on using USB or a serial communications at all, the standard platform will not work. You have to go to the performance model. The other thing is they are all DC powered. So there is not an AC option, as opposed to the performance series. So the performance series is significantly larger in its capabilities. So it can do approximately up to 300 screens, 400 alarms, 3,000 tags, multiple controllers. So you can see that it's 3 to 4 times the size. It does only come with DLR capabilities, but also does have that USB in case you want to do a serial. So if you have a upgraded HMI, but still a legacy PLC for the time being, you can get away with doing it that way. It does have AC and DC options. So if you need to, or you do not have a DC power supply and do not want to add a DC power supply, then Performance also has that AC option. So here's a quick just kind of rundown. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I did highlight it already, but this just kind of shows you the general, just in a tabular format, of the comparison between the two, just for future reference. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things on the PanelView, the Performance series. So they do use the new style tabs. They're much simpler to implement. It does have an SD card, always has the DLR, and it does have the USB for upload and download or serial communications. And it is a full metal frame, whereas the standard version is a plastic or polymer. So here's the standard version, just to kind of show you. It looks a little bit different, right? So the USB port here cannot be used for serial communications. Just FYI, it's only for transfer. It does have an SD card, still uses the new style clips. And then again, it has either single or dual DLR Ethernet port capability. So typically what people really need to focus on is when they get a new PanelView, what do I need to do, and what are the steps that need to be happening? All right, so the first thing we do is connect to your 24-volt DC power. Initially, it'll bring up a screen that is going to ask for a password and a challenge. So you can see that on the left-hand side here. You'll have a set password and then set challenge and response. That password and challenge are designed when you need to get to the desktop of the PanelView. So if you need to establish a VNC viewer, file transfer protocol, or you need to back up or export some sort of logging or something along that nature, that is what that username or that password and challenge will be for. It is not related to the machine edition application itself. It's just how do you close down the application? You need that in there. Once you set that up, you do have the ability to go back in and remove the password, so not require that. But for the most part, you should probably leave that in there, just because most people will never need to get to the desktop or the Windows application that is running on the PanelView. They really just want to get to the configuration page, which is the second screen that I showed here. So whenever you close an application, it will bring you to the configuration page here, as long as you do require a password. So if you do require a password, it brings you to this, and this will give you everything that you would need for the application purposes. So on initial startup, what you need to do is you'll go to the terminal settings, which is F4. Then I skipped the kind of the rest of the screenshots just because they're not as important, but you'll go to the networks, network connections, network adapter, and then select IP address button, which will bring you to the bottom right screen there. And that's where you could enable and disable DHCP on the top right corner button. And you can also enter in the IP address, subnet, and a gateway. The gateway is if you are routing it or sending it through a NAT. So that's where you end up adding the gateway if you need to. So really, those are the two primary things that you want to do directly out of box: is give it the password and a challenge, and then give it an IP address, unless you never plan on using the IP address, in which it defaults to using DHCP. But for programming purposes and everything, even if you don't plan on using the Ethernet, it's still best practice to give it an IP address just so you know what it is. So the next thing you have would be to actually check the firmware. So on the middle screen here, if you hit terminal settings, all the way at the bottom would be about, or when you first power up the screen, you'll have a small Excel sheet grid looking thing that pops up. And in that grid, it'll say app, APP, and next to it, it'll have a number. So PanelViews are configured with a firmware from the factory, but you don't know necessarily what the firmware is. So if you need to change it. So at this point, most PanelViews are still version 10, but they are going to be coming with version 11 soon. So if you want to move to 11, then you automatically have to update the firmware to get to the newest platform. And then version 12 is coming out again this month, hopefully by the end of this month. It might be a little delayed, but that's their anticipated date. So once you get the PanelView, you determine which version you have or of firmware that's on there. And then you have two different ways you can update the firmware. Earlier, I showed you the Control Flash Plus software. For the PanelView itself, it is better to use the ME Firmware Upgrade Wizard. It is catered specifically to the PanelViews, and it gives you, again, the two options. So the one option you have is you can do it directly from the PC, in which it will use FactoryTalk links. So that is our shortcut here. So when you initially open up the wizard, you get this option, but you can upgrade from the terminal or on the terminal, or you can create a firmware card. If you choose to do it directly from the PC, it will prompt you. You will select use the network connection, and this is where you need the Ethernet connection. So that's why it's best to put in an IP address. And then you could browse to the PanelView itself, and then pick the firmware you want to use and download. The other thing you can do is you can use an SD card or a USB. You tell it the location of the USB. So you check the second box here, tell it where it needs to go, and then you could take the USB, plug it into the PanelView. The PanelView, as long as it's set up properly, will auto recognize the device and then see that a firmware patch is installed on the device and start to upgrade the firmware on that PanelView. So it's a bit of an easier process if you have a lot of PanelViews. Some people prefer to just put it on a USB or an SD card and then just plug it into all the PanelViews and update them all in an easier fashion. So the next thing we're going to cover in this first section is the hardware features and capabilities. So one thing that many people don't talk about, but is a really nice advantage to have with a PanelView, is when you purchase a PanelView, it comes with the FactoryTalk Viewpoint server embedded in the PanelView. What Viewpoint is it allows you to use a browser-based remote access to the PanelView. So it will not be the identical screens, or it does not need to be the identical screen. So it could be vice versa, but you publish whatever content you want to a URL address. And as long as you are on the same network as that PanelView, you can type in the URL address and it will open up graphics for you. So for like a local SCADA system or something like that, or local reporting that you build most of the content and logic in the PLC and you want to see that stuff from the office, but not everybody wants to install Machine Edition, right? Because that's just overly complicated. You can use this viewpoint. It is limited to only one person can connect at a time, but it does support multiple different browsers. So the next one that we are actually going to use today is a VNC viewer or virtual network computing. What that does is it actually allows you to take control of the PanelView remotely. So both the PanelView Plus 7 and the PanelView 5000s have this capability. It just makes it very nice and convenient when it comes to diagnostics and you want to see what the actual operator would see. You can connect to the controller remotely. The VNC viewer is how you can connect to the HMI easily. And that one gives you exactly what the operator would see. And again, it would allow you to control, if you choose to, you can control the VNC. You don't have to set that up. You could do view only, which would require the operator to do the navigation and input. But if you want to control it, you could set it up that way. The last kind of big one that is really nice is that file transfer protocol, so FTP. So in the event you have alarm logs, data logging, you want to transfer PDF manuals or videos so that you can view PDFs and things like that from the PanelView, all that can be done through FTP. It's a relatively simple process to set up, and there are several knowledge base articles to help you through that. And then if you ever needed, I can also help you with that. There are a few more little productivity tools that the PanelView uses in order to make itself a little bit better, right? You can configure email notifications from a PanelView. PanelView typically uses an ActiveX. So many objects use ActiveX control for outside functionality, such as web browsers, PDFs, things along that nature. So that is another thing you can do. So you can embed a URL address into a PanelView if you wanted someone to get to that. It also has video playback. So there's a couple little things like that that are nice features that are embedded into the PanelView that give it all that range of capability for many people.